First bow, second bow, third bow. Over to you, Luang Por.
Thank you. So this there we go. So it's Christmas Eve in Singapore and Malaysia. It's Christmas Eve morning here. I was kind of confused yesterday, so if I was unclear, my apologies. I'm kind of these Zoom sessions are interesting because trying to get my head around the people in Singapore are now going to sleep and people in UK are having lunch and then we're here. So, you know, the mind likes to kind of have a time zone to function in. So you're sort of trying to function in 3 time zones. Plus I'm a bit jet lagged. So if I was unclear yesterday, my apologies. But that's the way it is. It's like this. So one of the sense I get about meditators who are from urban societies and who have a lot of education and who use computers a lot, I think they tend to think, and I'm one of them, we tend to overthink what we should be doing in meditation. Our intellect is a kind of problem-solving mechanism, and so it keeps trying to find solutions and methods and what's the next step and what's the next step. So it likes that kind of intellectual clarity. But there's another way of learning where you simply start doing something and you allow the space of observation to teach you. And this is why I think I refer to craft a lot. So for instance, I'm now learning to do some tapestry weaving, like Navajo weaving. And so I have a loom and I've had some instruction, and there's a certain technique I'm trying to get right of interlocking blocks of color and so on and so forth. So I've got the information, and what I have to do is I have to just start doing it and making mistakes and making a mess and undoing it and starting again and looking at it and just allow the process of observation to actually teach me. And then, so I've been doing this for a few days. So I think I have it down. I think I understand what that technique is. And I didn't come to that understanding just through thinking. I had some thought, I had some ideas to apply my hands to and my intellect to, because there's also the intellect of things, where by observing things, the wisdom and intelligence we have gain insights. And I think that aspect would come from a sense of just trusting in doing something and allowing the observing mind to educate you. So a lot of the questions that come, oftentimes I'm reading the question, I think you're overthinking this. You're trying to figure all this out too much in thought. And that's the hindrance of doubt. The hindrance of doubt is very, very powerful, because it seems that if I get an answer, then I won't have any doubts. But if you observe the hindrance of doubt, you'll see that one question begets another doubt. Oftentimes, one answer gets another answer question. So not to dismiss our intellect in that way, but to be careful. Don't try to figure everything out. Don't overthink it. Just kind of give it a go, see what happens. So the suggestion I was making, I haven't taught this Who Am I for a while, but I think I'm kind of trying to address that that aspect of over intellectual approach to Buddhist meditation, overthinking things. And in a sense, when you raise a doubt into the mind, it's like dealing fire with fire. If they have fires in California, then apparently the firefighters will set a fire to go against the fire, some kind of a firewall, I suppose. We don't get many fires here, so I'm not that conversant with it. But when I say, let's say, if my mind is just analyzing, well, what should I do and how should I do it? Who's thinking? So I'm putting doubt against doubt, but now that brings me to silence because there's no answer to it. That's what I'm hoping will happen. In that moment of sincerely offering that up into the mind, who is thinking? That can't just be parrot talk. If you're just doing it automatically, it won't really work. And that's the problem with any technique. It just becomes another habit. So there has to be a kind of freshness in it. Because in the freshness, well, who's worried? There is clarity. There is true clarity. Then the question is not so much, then the question is, how can I sustain that clarity? Because in a sense, you're there. There's nowhere else to go. So then I would say a mindfulness of what you're doing. So if you're meditating and you like breath, then present moment clarity with an in-breath, present moment clarity with an out-breath. The in-breath is short, the in-breath is long. Or if you're brushing your teeth and you're thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, who's thinking? And then brushing your teeth. So the idea of the next moment after the moment of awakening is the sense of composure and collectedness that you, like if you observing the breath, then if you're trying to focus on the breath and hold your attention on the breath and control the mind, that's a kind of forceful thing, which doesn't work very well for me. Maybe it works for you. For me, what works more is like just a sense of composure. The breath is like this. So the kind of scattered nature of thought and worry and planning, all that kind of scattered energy, you collect, compose on an in-breath, on an out-breath. And that's something, you don't have to think about that. So perhaps putting in language of no thought, no need to think about this, one breath at a time. And as your mind starts to project, well, am I really doing it right? Should I be doing this? Or what are intentions? No thought. So you start to have language which isn't analytical, language which evokes the awakened mind. Then you can start to use what we call sammasankappa, right thought. The right kind of thinking you use depends on your character. If you're very self-critical and you use self-critical thought, then that'll just be more of the habit. So if you say you're having difficulty in meditation, say, oh, you just can't, have to try harder. That kind of egotistical thought. Sammasankappa, right thinking, isn't egotistical. It's coming from wisdom. It's coming from intelligence. It's coming from a kind of self-coaching that you're doing with yourself and for yourself. So like say feeling confused. Yesterday I felt confused, not in a overly neurotic way, just in a normal human way that sometimes we feel confused. And then the mind wants to go into the thinking driven by confusion. Well, if I practice awareness, then I can say like language, confusion is like this, or who's confused. Both are bringing you to the same moment of clarity. But notice that the language of confusion is like this isn't analytical. It's not a judgment. It's not trying to figure it out. It's not trying to get rid of it. It's just recognition, just clear recognition. And from that, there's a possibility of knowing the rest of what's going on. So if I'm walking down the hallway and the mind has kind of confused mental energy, then yeah, there's confusion like this. There's the hallway, there's walking. So there's always a chance to kind of compose the mind and collect the mind, which isn't really a technique. It isn't like a technique you do. It's just mindfulness and awareness of the way things are. So I'm suggesting that this sense of who is thinking can be very, very powerful, but you will find that you won't do it. Because it's interesting, people would rather be confused or would rather worry or would rather analyze. And it's not so much that you're doing it, it's the force of habit that's doing it. And this is quite frustrating and disappointing, where on some sense you can, yourself, maybe that your tendency, like let's say if someone, excuse me, if someone has a, like someone likes to complain, I put likes. Well, they're compelled to complain because that's the habit of mind. So that, the kind of complaining habit sees the world and then projects onto the world the complaint. This person is not right, the weather's this way, my body is not this way. And so the complaining mind begins to create a reality, an inner reality, which is simply a projection. So then the honesty, the Satyavarami, the truthfulness of a contemplative this is something that's created by the mind. Even if the person is not a very nice person, the mind is creating this kind of complaining. That has to be, I think, the first step is actually understanding yourself on that habitual level, because we all are creatures of personal habits. Your habits are different than mine, but we both have habits, or all 150 of us have habits, 138 of us have habits. So that's just the nature of vipaka karma, the resultant karma of being a human being, being in culture, and so on. And those habits will create a sense of self, right? So the person who is arrogant has a sense of alienation to others through arrogance. The person that is self-disparaging has a sense of alienation to others through self-disparaging. They're different patterns, but it's the same pattern, the same way that the mind functions through patterns. So the who am I practice can kind of start to interrupt those. But first and foremost, you have to see that, yeah, there are patterns of mind. This isn't an ultimate reality. The weather is a particular way, or my body's that's just my mind creating that. So we monitor thought. And what we do when we monitor thought, we want to monitor, is it wholesome thinking or unwholesome thinking? And what is unwholesome thinking? It's egoistic thinking, me and my thinking, taking life personally thinking. So let's say there's a person in the office who is sloppy, and everyone else is very neat. I'm sure all Singaporeans are very neat. So a sloppy person maybe doesn't make it, and I don't know. I'm kind of sloppy myself. So you see the sloppy person, and that's just a visual image, but your perception of what a good office person is not sloppy. It's like being careful and neat. And so the mind complains about that person. Sloppy, slob, something horrible like that. Now, you're not going to tell anyone, but your mind starts to generate that kind of self and other. That's what I mean by self-thinking. Because when I think you're a sloppy person, it may be true, but I also create myself. I'm not a sloppy person. You are. I mean, this is a simplistic example. And that's what we mean self-thinking, me and my thinking. Whereas if you can step behind the narrative, behind the story, behind the seeming reality of it, say, well, that's a mood of criticism. That's a huge step in enlightenment, isn't it? because you're no longer, you're not dismissing how your mind is functioning, but you're diagnosing something deeper than being caught in the storyline. And that's why we say, know the mood of the mind. Luang Por would emphasize that. No, what's the mood of the mind? So a critical mood is different than an inspired mood, obviously. But the thinking mind, the projections of the thinking mind create a kind of seeming reality. So you step back and you say, you get to know the moods of your own character. And they're not that many. Each of us have a personality which we have to, we're not only incarnated in a body, we're also incarnated in a personality, aren't we? Think about it, right? You know, like, you are not your personality, are you? Right? Like the moods that come and go create a personality, correct? The fears that come and go create a kind of personality. So let's say if I am very shy, then that mood of shyness creates a certain way I interact with people, a personality. But I can witness that. I can know that because that is an object of awareness. So we're not trying to become perfect personalities. This is a relief. You know, I remember Luang Por used to say that a lot the first year at Wat Nana Chan. And I didn't quite get it then. He said, you know, Americans are into personality. We want to be personality plus. I said, what's he talking about? But I get it now. It took me a few years. But you can see the sense of whoever you are is an object in awareness. It arises cause and condition. So if you're a Sri Lankan person, right, your personality will relate to me differently than if you're a Western person who has no sense of Buddhist culture. Neither is good or bad, but that's the way the conditioned mind works. So you can develop a personality which is very, very beautiful by developing metta, karuna, all the Brahma Viharas, and maybe that's what Christmas is about. But a lot of the personality stuff is just habits driven by fear and desire. And those habits which are driven by fear and desire, I would say, come up as self-thinking, me and my thinking. You can know that. If you step away from the narrative in the story and back into the mood of the mind. Once you have that, then you kind of get it. Okay, that's how Viradhammo gets created in these situations. Or that's how William gets created in these situations. Or that's how Amritsari gets created as a personality. And once you understand the few patterns that you have, then you can be very, very skillful and say, who's critical? Who's complaining? And now you're really cutting in to these powerful habits. You're waking up to the habits, you're breaking them up with this very, very helpful question. Who's anxious? Who's flustered? Let's say you're on the internet now. You're doing this an internet retreat, and your internet connection gets slow. This is one of the great tragedies of modern life. And all of a sudden, I start talking like a slow frog, and you can't understand what I'm saying. And then what happens is you probably hate Elon Musk because his satellite isn't working, or your internet provider, or whoever. And all of a sudden, a sense of self gets created, right? Internet, I pay big money for this stuff, and I'm not, what's he saying? Why is he talking so? So the whole sense of self gets born into consciousness. And if you believe in that, well, you can run with it till the cows come home. But if you know, oh, this is a kind of self that arises with internet frustration, say, oh yeah, oh, frustration feels this way. Who's frustrated? And you break the cycle of belief, you break the cycle of habit, Now, you're not repressing it because you're quite mindful of the patterns of your mind, the conditioning of your mind, how you react. There's a lot of intelligence going on there. And then you start to get the skill of your own personality, the skills to be with your own personality. Having said that, we also have, we have very skillful tendencies. We have generosity, compassion, forgiveness, all those. And notice that those don't tend to be egotistical. Isn't like if you've had some really bad time with someone, some disappointment or betrayal or whatever, and you got really hurt, and so you carried it around for a while, maybe a couple of years if it was really bad. But at some point, don't most of us, unless it's like extreme abuse or warfare, things like that, those are very, very difficult. But in the ordinary nature of disappointments and betrayals and so on, there comes a time where you begin to not want to be reborn as the person who hates that other person. You don't want to be the person who will not forgive them no matter what. You just don't want to be that anymore. You don't want to be born into that anymore. And your heart slowly comes to, yeah, it hurt, but I forgive you. And that's not egotistical, I would say. It's a letting go of ego. It's a letting go of self and saying, yeah, that hurts. I mean, there is self-language there in what I'm saying, but it's no longer this held idea. They were wrong, I was right. They were wrong, I was right. I'm never going to forget them. You do that for a while and it's just too painful, isn't it? And then you see that happen, you say, revenge feels this way, or who's revengeful? Who doesn't want to forgive? You start to break it up, and eventually your heart does come to some sense of loving acceptance. And that, you find, of course, is a great relief, isn't it? It's a great relief to actually finally say, it's all right, I forgive you. You may be not going to say that to that person because that person might be cruel or whatever, but in your own heart, you start to feel liberated. And why is that? Because it's not an egotistical thing. It's the love of acceptance. So when we talk about the loving qualities that the Buddha exhibited and taught about, they're very important to kind of not just develop them as a meditation, but actually to try to live them. So quite simply, Christmas, is kind of, we're all supposed to be very loving and give each other presents and so on. It's a good idea. Presents, give each other dharma. I'm a bit short on cash myself, so I can't send you any Christmas presents. But we can give each other what? We can give each other friendship, forgiveness, care, sensitivity. We can listen. These are beautiful, beautiful qualities of the human heart. So these these come about more and more through the letting go of fear. And what's the letting go of fear? Fear as the, oh, who's afraid? Oh, who's anxious? Or fear feels this way. That's the beginning of letting go. That is letting go because it's known as an object. You are no longer the subject. And as the heart begins to dissipate the fearful qualities, the anxious qualities, the anger qualities, the unforgiving qualities, as that falls away, then the human heart naturally responds to life from love. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that when you're not preoccupied with your own cares and concerns, and you have enough sensitivity to see a squirrel in the snow? I just fed the squirrels my toast and my oatmeal this morning. So if I'm just present to the natural elements and I see a mammal, don't I relate to it like I'm a mammal too? It feels the cold. I mean, it's got a better outfit than me. My outfit doesn't have much fur, but I still there were two female squirrels on my feeder this summer. And you could see that they just had babies and so on. And I could relate to not that I'm a mother, but I could relate to the maternal nature of a squirrel, right? That's not egotistical. That's when I get out of the way and relate to natural life in the way of love. And I'm not going to take the squirrel into my room and have an intimate conversation with it. It's not romantic love. It'd be messy too, and the monks wouldn't be very happy. It's not romantic if it's connection, isn't it? So the capacity of connection is beautifully enhanced when we awaken to the tendencies of disconnection. When I notice the disconnect with someone else, that they shouldn't be like that, or they're like that kind of criticism, that alienation prevents love, obviously. But when there is the awakening to that, who's critical? Who said that? Criticism feels this way. You start to let go of the alienation, and there is more connection. And that's, I think, what the Brahma Viharas are about. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, loving kindness, loving compassion, loving joy, and loving acceptance. These are very, very important. And they're natural. They're natural states of mind. They're not projections onto the world. They arise according to causes and conditions. So when I see the squirrel, I relate to it that way. If the squirrel got into my room, I think I'd relate it to another way. Get out. So that's all right too. But I don't think I'd want to murder it or something like that. So Christmas, like, I don't know, like in Singapore, you've never had a white Christmas, correct? Because if you did, I think everything would be finished. The world would be over. So let's hope you don't have a white Christmas. Now, here, we've got a white Christmas. It was minus 10 by my thermometer. It was minus 10. So it'll be another crisp day. And in my family, Christmas was, my parents were Lutheran from Latvia. And we went to church every third year. So it wasn't that frequent. In other words, we didn't go to church. But every now and then, I think I have a vague memory, we'd go to it. And our Christmas celebration was always on the Christmas Eve, which is more like the Eastern European tradition. So we would, if we did go to church, we'd go to an evening service and then come back, and Mom would have prepared a big meal. And then we'd go into the living room with the Christmas tree, and the kids would get the presents, the kids being me and my brother. And lots of times we knew what was in the boxes because we were naughty, and so on and so forth. And we opened up the Christmas presents, and it was quite sweet. It's a nice warm memory. And those kinds of cultural memories we have are very beautiful. But I think the kind of remembrance you want to participate in, whether you are from a Christian background or whatever background, is remembering the sense of non-alienation with oneself and others, the sense of non-separation with oneself and others. And this isn't some kind of woo-woo emptiness talk. It's very real emotional sensitivity. And interestingly enough, you will notice the connection more when you notice the disconnect. It has to be that way, because the disconnect is the sort of symptom that one has to now work with. And this is where the Four Noble Truths come in. The disconnect is suffering, alienation, whatever you want to call it. And the connection to that disconnect is no longer taking it personally. And so we say, suffering feels this way, alienation feels this way. Then you are with the feeling of alienation. So if I'm highly critical of someone, self and other, And then I say to myself, suffering's like this. Who's suffering? There's no longer a disconnect. There's awareness of the way things are. And then the next moment is then to enhance that awareness. So during this retreat, if you would just consider the simple methodology that when you find yourself thinking, either diagnose the mood, frustration, irritation, whatever you want, and then who's frustrated? Bring your mind to silence. Bring your mind to silent presence. And then the question is, how can you sustain silent presence? Not get something else, not attain to something else. What in your makeup would be helpful in sustaining yet another moment of clear presence? You might say the same question. You might compose yourself around body meditation. Doesn't really matter. Once awareness is established, then you're home. That's your home base. How can you stay home rather than get something else or get rid of something else? Now, doubt, and as I was saying about this, the problem of overthinking, doubt won't like that because the silence of the mind isn't an intellectual answer. And it's very neutral, actually, until you start to realize the depths of it. So then the doubting mind will come up and say, am I doing it right? What's the next step? And realize there is no next step, but the next step is just knowing, oh, thought is like this. So start to notice the gaps between thought. Notice no thought. When I say to myself, if the internet is slow, it looks like cloudy today, it might be slow. And something's not working. And I say to myself, frustration feels this way. Not only is there a statement, but right after the statement, there's silence. Notice the silence. See if you can expand that silence to 2 moments, 3 moments, no thought. You're not getting rid of thought, but you're noticing the silence after thought. So the thought is, who's thinking? Silence, 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 awareness. You're not going anywhere. Then you get kidnapped and you start to, think about whatever. And at some point, that thought process will be interrupted. Who's thinking? 1 moment, 2 moments, 3 moments. So you build up these little moments of no thought, these little moments of present moment clarity. And trust in that, I would say. Trust in that, because it's actually very, very powerful. It doesn't seem like much because it doesn't have it just doesn't seem like much normally. And the doubting mind will overanalyze, I would say, if that is your, if your job is to do a lot of intellectual analysis, whether you're in IT or you're a lawyer or you're a professor of whatever, realize that the habit of dealing with life is to analyze and intellectualize and problem solve. Here, there's no problem to solve. Here, that you're not trying to go to another place. You are in this place. So that's different. And then the habit of overthinking will be very profound. It will keep coming up. So you'll keep having to do this. 1 moment of space, 2 moments of space, 3 moments of silence, and then blah, 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 blah. It'll take over again. The frustration will tend to make you want to get rid of thought. That won't work because that's aversion. That's alienation. You don't want to be alienated to yourself. So it's not really who you are. It's just the mind's been conditioned that way to think and analyze, think and analyze. So if that is the case, you just keep trusting in moments of space, moments of silence. Now, with that tendency to really analyze and think a lot, people will quite often try harder to focus on their object of meditation in order to get rid of thinking. So they'll notice themselves thinking, then they'll focus on the breath really, really hard, trying to suppress thought. That will not work. I think all of us have tried that. You just end up thinking more. So what's the middle way? The middle way is, oh, thought feels like this, or who's thinking. Then you're alert. You're not trying to get rid of thought. You're alert. Carry it through 2 minutes, 2 seconds, 10 hours if you can, but 1 moment, 2 moments. Keep building up those little moments and trust in that. It happens again. Who's thinking? 1 moment, 2 moments. And even if in an hour's meditation, you do that 20, 30 times, that's fine. You're training the mind, you're training the mind. Now, once you start to abide as awareness, once that begins to be a more dominant way of being, I would say, the necessity for putting in the language of who's thinking falls away. And I think the sign there is when you really do notice the sense of self as thought arising and ceasing in awareness. You're no longer kind of caught by it. Then there's no real necessity of putting that question in, because the witnessing posture, abiding as awareness, has become stronger, has become more continuous. The silence is more apparent, even within the movement of thought. So there's a kind of gradation of using language, using technique. In the beginning, if your mind's very busy, you want to like compose your mind, really use the breath very, very well, or body meditation, this language of who's thinking. And then you'll find you don't have to do that much. You find that kind of falls away, and there's a more natural clarity. And what happens there is then the whole sense of a doer begins to be your object of awareness. In the beginning, there's a strong sense of a doer doing something to calm the mind. As that proceeds, the sense of the doer itself becomes something that's coarse. And then you start to enter more and more into the Brahma Viharas, because the Brahma Viharas they're the kind of welcoming energy. They're not trying to go anywhere. Love is a kind of welcoming energy. Compassion is a welcoming energy. So it's a very relaxing kind of energy. And so you start to see that awareness becomes more profound with loving kindness. Loving kindness is a very, very relaxing kind of, sure, come, this is the way it is. All things are allowed, that kind of openness. So the natural progression is from a sense of I have to do something to more and more clarity, to the sense of open-hearted awareness as a very beautiful and relaxed result from that process. So, having said that, anytime you can bring forth metta bhavana is a good thing, as a very deliberate path. So, bringing up gratitude, just beginning your meditation with gratitude is fabulous. It's very easy, and hopefully we're all grateful for something, right? And so you just bring the heart to that sense of gratitude. And notice that sense of gratitude, you're not trying to get anything. You're not going anywhere with it. You have grandchildren. Think of your grandchildren. May they be well. May they be free from suffering. Your brothers and sisters, in whatever way you want. So the heart begins to relax with that, and doing that. And then you're putting in very wholesome attitudes. Then the mind has its habits, its negative habits, and you work with that. Who's thinking? Who's frustrated? And you get better and better at that. And then it all sort of comes together. You've put in the wholesome intentions of gratitude, forgiveness. You can't always do that. Sometimes there's no space for forgiveness. You've just been hurt too badly. Or there's no space for loving kindness. You just feel rage or fear. That's fine too, because you can work with that. And so all these things kind of come together, I think, in the final piece of open-hearted loving kindness, awareness, loving kindness. These things are very much conjoined. All right, I think that was sufficient for pondering. Let me see. There's a whole bunch of questions, but a lot of the questions were, I thought, basically overthinking, to be honest. When I try to practice Buddhism, I always find myself engaging my brain and mind more than my heart. And I realize that the neglecting of the heart is mainly why I deviate from my practice, e.g., feeling frustrated when meditating, feeling resigned about the difficulty of the Eightfold Noble Path. May I know how I can involve my heart more whenever practicing Buddhism? So I think that's sort of really to the point of engaging the analytical mind rather than the notion of awakeness to the way things are. So for this person, I would say, who is feeling frustrated, rather than being caught in the analysis of frustration or being frustrated. What is frustration? So you kind of stepping back from that. Good morning, Luang Por. I have an issue with self-discipline. Oftentimes I find myself being lazy and procrastinating. Any suggestions how to reinforce self-discipline with regards to both worldly goals and spiritual goals? And there's someone else who said they had a snooze after lunch. Snooze after lunch is allowed. It's probably mandatory. Or if you don't snooze, you just, but with the self-discipline one, I wonder, like, if you have a culture which has a certain norm of what self-discipline is, and then your family has conditioned you to some ideas of self-discipline, is the word self-discipline actually a wholesome word? Right? Is it a good idea? Or is it just some idealized notion of what this human being should be doing in this world of things and disciplines? So I would tend to investigate the difference between idealism and reality. So idealism, again, is a thought, and that can be both a personal thought, but also a culturally conditioned thought. What a woman should be, what a monk should be, what a man should be, how many hours I should meditate, should never snooze after lunch, no way, stuff like that. So self-discipline, it has its place. Yeah, if everyone's like in a cold climate, we have, on a rainy day, we have the fourth refuge. It's called the duvet. You know what a duvet is? It's another blanket. So anyway, yeah, someone got it. Fourth refuge. So that's okay. That's a little self-discipline would be good. Get up, brush your teeth, and so on. But in the normal course of events, I don't find the folk that come to these retreats and hang out together, I don't find people being all that lazy. I find them really diligent on retreats. So what is the ideal of what I should be doing? Okay, you have to look at that. And then what's actually happening. So as whatever way you're living your life, if the language of self-criticism comes, oh, you're lazy, you should be trying harder, you shouldn't be doing this, that's what you have to begin to notice first. That language, oh, this is, it feels like this, or who's thinking? Who's judging? And that judgment quite often is really not very kind. It's often not compassionate. It's often just very, very harsh around some kind of idealism. But the pattern is important. Whatever, you have to wake up to the pattern. And then how is the sense of self created? Through the idealism of self-discipline. The other kind of being indulgent is the fourth refuge mentality, which says, well, I've had 8 hours, but it's cold, I need another 4 hours of sleep. That's rationalizing. That's rationalizing behavior, which is not very skillful. You have to look at that. So are you, like, when this person says self-discipline, are you really that lazy? Or is everyone around you just stressed out and overworked? That can be the thing too. What is it like? I was just reading about Japanese culture that they have to go drinking with their boss every day after work. That's absolutely batty, crazy kind of cultural norm. And so not that I say you're living in that kind of a norm, but what if the norm is not healthy? What if the norm in a culture is you should work 12 hours a day? You know, that's what's really good. And it's actually a rather messed up capitalistic idea of and you're functioning from that norm. So what is healthy, what is not healthy? But the sense of self that comes up with these issues of idealism, that's what you have to listen to. And notice how that affects you in the sense of self-disparagement. Self-disparagement, criticism, self-criticism, guilt, shame, these are very powerful moods of mind that we experience in culture. Shame, guilt, and I'm not good enough, I'm not up to the mark, I should be different, I said this wrong. I get that a lot as a teacher. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. That joke, I did it again. I made fun of William with his iPhone. No, he's not going to like me anymore. You know, that's the kind of haunting voice of the mind. It's always critical. And you just have to know that, critical mind. Who's criticizing? Who's thinking? You start to break down all those things. So in terms of self-discipline, I think that's what's more important, the issue of self, rather than what self-discipline is. Because if you're cultivating meditation in a way which is skillful, you want to do it. It's not a punishment, honest. That thou must meditate for 45 minutes. It's like you have to clean the room. It's not like that, honest. It's something that is very interesting. It opens the heart, it calms the mind, and you want to go to it. So if that's the case, like if you just feel meditation is a punishment, then better go for a walk and just contemplate Dhamma, or make a quiche for your mother or something like that, something more skillful. So the attitude to meditation is not conquering or getting rid of. It is one of acceptance and openness and curiosity. How does it work? How does suffering work? How does the mind get caught up into these moods? And then you have the kind of learning of craft where you just look and you observe, I get it. Yeah, I understand. And that understanding comes through giving the mind a chance to observe and giving wisdom a chance to come up into consciousness. Wisdom takes a bit of time. You observe. Oh yeah, I get it. I see how it works. Driving a car, when you first learn to drive a car, there's so much stuff going on, you didn't know what to do. Now you do it automatically. What was the process? The process was actually just doing. So on this retreat, I suggest just do it. Just try. Just stick to some kind of a schedule. Keep awakening the mind with who's thinking. Keep doing that and see what happens over 3 or 4 days' time. All right. I think I think that's enough. William, you're probably all tired, ready for your Betty buys.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu anumodami. Brothers and sisters in the Dhamma, please put your palms together in Anjali and let us pay our respect to Luang Por with 3 bows together. First bow. Second bow. Third bow.
So tomorrow is William's birthday. So when everyone gets up in the morning, then just say, William, happy birthday. Flood his being with goodness.
Thank you, Luang Por. Have a good
Okay.
rest. We'll see you again.
Okay, see you next time. Bye for now.